These are the Arendal 1723 THX monitors. They're huge by all accounts compared to other stand mount speakers. They weigh a ton, HDF versus MDF construction, but more on that later. They have maybe the best looking and designed terminal plate in its price class, and we get all kinds of tuning options. Run these in sealed or ported with the included ports. They're not a fingerprint magnet, at least not in the matte finish that we have here. These are equipped with a 28mm soft dome tweeter, housed in a really nice aluminum waveguide, and surrounded by two 8-inch drivers. These are THX certified, and also happen to be some of the best home theater speakers I've had in for review. Now let's get into why. The 1723s cost $2,599 US for the pair for this matte black finish, as well as the matte white and gloss versions that are also offered. There's a generous 60-day audition period, as well as a 10-year warranty that's in line with some of the best offered around this price. It's always a bit of a worry when you buy something overseas, seeing how packages arrive simply coming from inside the US. But for your assurance, I can tell you that these are packaged up extremely well. There's extra protection on all the boxes, inside and outside, as well as a really well thought out foam design that keeps things floating within the box. And of course they come shipped in a soft drawstring bag to help it prevent any scuffs if there's any kind of movements within the box during shipment. And don't forget the gloves too. This review is going to touch on home theater as well as 2-channel. Let me know in the comments below how you're using your space. Dedicated home theater, dedicated 2-channel, or a hybrid do-it-all space. That'll help me out on topics to cover in future videos. These are THX Ultra certified, like I mentioned, which covers a lot of ground, really. One of the key points being that it can hit reference levels in a 3,000 cubic foot room with a 12-foot distance from the speakers. THX reference levels is defined as 105 dB peaks with minimal distortion, which, if you're unaware, is really loud. Generally a lot louder than anything that I would listen to on a regular day-to-day basis. I took out my mic and I had no issue hitting these dB levels. Everything felt really controlled, and that was enough, so then I turned it back down. The certification also covers things like frequency response, dispersion, time domain, basically a lot of the qualities that you want to look for in a good home theater speaker. Like I mentioned, a 28mm soft dome tweeter surrounded by this really well-made aluminum waveguide. No plastic here. Really no plastic to be seen anywhere on this build, which is very much appreciated. Well, you might assume it's actually made of lead when you pick one of these up. They're roughly 60 pounds each. The 8-inch drivers are built around the same fundamentals as the sub drivers they make, minus the extra glass fiber reinforcement, as these met the stiffness requirements without it. It's kind of a lot to look at these in person. This is a really tall stand mount speaker, but there is a purpose behind it. The additional bass driver helps to keep the distortion down and increase its power handling. Flipping them around, we see this really well-made terminal. It's a recessed design that looks super clean. The plate is a brushed aluminum, and the binding posts are CNC machined copper that is coated in rhodium plating that'll resist any type of corrosion. The jumpers installed here are also plated copper, if you don't plan to use any of the bi-wiring options that they offer. These also do come equipped with some really nice and strongly attached magnetic grills, perforated metal frame, wrapped in black fabric. Just another area that doesn't include any plastic, and they seem to be really well made. You will notice 2 ports on the back of these. They include plugs, so you can run these in sealed or ported configs. The biggest change here will be the frequency response. Sealed dipping down to 58 plus or minus 3 dB, and both vents open, reaching down to 34, which is quite impressive for a stand mount speaker. But at the same time, this is nearly the size of a full floor standing model. Nonetheless, it digs deep. My recommendation here would be to seal it up if you plan to integrate a sub with these. Depending on the placement, the sealed variant should get plenty of room assistance for an extended roll-off. Let the sub, in this case their 1723 1V, handle all the really deep extension, and let the speakers in the sealed configuration shine with the fast and accurate sound that these are capable of. Bringing these together with a sub was really simple. Every once in a while you find a pairing that you really have to fight with placements, but this one was really as simple as it gets. Just set it and forget it. Possibly the tendencies of this speaker helped here, with the in-room measurements being relatively flat. Open up the ports and it sounds good as well, as the deeper extension is pretty noticeable. Both offer a great but different experience. If this is going to be in a home theater setup, which I feel the majority of buyers here are going to fall into that, you might as well plug up the ports. In almost all cases, you would have these crossed over well before the roll-off point either way. If you're shopping these for music, a 2-channel setup possibly, play around with it. Like I mentioned, depending on the placement, a lot of things can happen in that lower registry. There isn't a single answer here until you either listen or measure the response in your particular space. Give them both a try and see which one you prefer here. If I was asked to simply describe the differences, I would say that the ported version sounds a bit warmer. The increase in the low-end presence brings more of a sense of weight, and on the other hand, the sealed variants sound very nimble and precise. You tend to notice the high frequencies a little bit more, which is where I would generally gravitate to for movies. Detail and vocal clarity is very high on these. I mentioned home theater use as the main use case. That was my primary test, but there's no reason that you can't use these for a dedicated 2-channel room as well. It's such a well-behaved speaker that it's going to be up to the task of really anything. It's also very efficient, 89 dB sensitivity. You can realistically power these straight out of your receiver without a problem. But at the same time, they built them to handle an absolute beast of an amp, up to 400 watts RMS. I can honestly say they didn't appear to need it though. It may work in your favor if you have a large space, something like that. But these very much so come to life with, very little power, everyday power levels from something like a receiver. If you take a look at some of the components in the crossover network, you can see that these are no joke. Taking a look at some of this helps to show the full picture of its capabilities. It's not simply drivers rated for a lot of power. It's the whole package. The inert cabinet, constructed of HDF, the large drivers, and for example, the overbuilt crossover network to round it up. Really, the only place these likely aren't going to be tested today is near field in the office. It might look a little odd having 2 little refrigerators on each side of my desk. We need to talk a little bit more about the size today. As far as stand mounts go, these are huge, and finding a stand can be a little difficult. The only bookshelf I have to compare for size, just to give you an idea, would be these Polks, the LSIM 703. It's a really large bookshelf speaker, but it pales in comparison to these monsters. Now, I don't believe they made them this size for sheer bragging rights. When you experience these, you'll get a sense of ease with these. You're never going to fluster the monitors unless you push them to absolute extremes, which is great, but we can't sit them on the floor. The only stand I had on hand that would support them is also one of the cheapest around that, if you add some mods to it, video coming on that, perform as well as stands costing multitudes more. I know they used to sell a stand that basically extended this enclosure down to the floor. It made it sort of look like a floor standing speaker, but my honest thought there was, if you're getting the monitor and the Arendal enclosure extension, just get the floor standing model. I wasn't able to find the stand, so maybe they came to the same conclusion that I did there. Just make sure that you can set these on a stand worthy of them. Certainly nothing flimsy with their 60-pound weight and their tall height. These would essentially be like dropping a boat anchor into your flooring. It's honestly not a problem though, as long as you pair them up with something appropriate. The stands pictured here are $120 for the pair, and they're rated for 100 pounds each, and easily support the weight here. What I might even suggest here, if you're springing for the entire 1723 front stage, pick up a pair of their subs and actually use those as stands. Use something for isolation between them, but I think that's a fantastic way to bring in a pair of subs into the front stage without taking up too much room. Their sub designs are also a bit taller and they're kind of narrow, so they actually pair up pretty well. I was using these in stereo without a center channel with fantastic center imaging, as well as almost mind-boggling amounts of reach into my space. There were times I heard things coming from literally all around me. I can't say I've ever had another set of speakers in for review with quite the reach that these had. There was actually a moment I thought one of my kids was coming down the stairs, but it was actually coming from the left speaker 20 feet away from the staircase. Seating position matters here, as it does with all speakers. And basically, if you're within 30 degrees of center, you're going to be all right here. If you sit beyond that, you will have some negative impacts on the frequency response, but like I said, that's expected, and up to 30 degrees from the sweet spot, that's pretty good here. During my test, I started with them towed straight out into the room, but gradually I towed them in, which in my case brought them right into the sweet spot with the amount of detail retrieval and overall room presence. As for music, I found them to be dynamic, smooth, and pleasing. A really high-end sound from the tweeter. Treble details were easy to hear without being shrill. It's one thing to give people a lot of detail, and it really wows you, but it's a whole nother thing to do it without compromising. Vocals have a sound that you can really appreciate on these. The tone is great, likely why I enjoy them so much for home theater as well. I think they benefit from the tweeter crossover at 1.5 kilohertz. Keeps everything really smooth sounding. The bass output on these monitors is, well, a tower sound. They sound big. It brings a full sound that really brings it all together. The bass you might be expecting here is something like a Serwin Vega party speaker with dual 8-inch drivers, but it's actually not like that at all. It's not a forced sound by any means. It's smooth and detailed at all the right times, but it can certainly wake up when called upon. Have them too close to the wall, and you might even find it has a bit too much for your taste. Changing the context from music to movies, the speakers can stand on their own operating full range on your receiver, but you do benefit from a sub or two brought into the chain to further enhance effects and create more texture to the environments. And of course, the tactile response a lot of people crave. And if we're talking home theater bass, just get the subs. Soundstage is really impressive on these. These giants would basically just disappear into the room. I would say a lot of height with the sound as well. Pull these out from the back wall a bit and really listen to everything open up. Really, I'm not running into any misses here. Sorry guys, not much for drama on this one. I flat out like the speaker. Some speakers that are centered around home theater really show their cards when you listen to music in a negative way. These, on the other hand, welcome it. As long as you can find a stand to house them on, they should fit right in. Bringing this review to an end, the 1723 THX monitors are a very well-built, high-performing option. They offer superb sound quality with all the right touches. Large dynamic range, really well-behaved frequency response, precise soundstage, and the most important for some, basically get as loud as you could safely tolerate without distortion. Bring these into your home theater or dedicated music space, and I can't imagine that you're going to end up disappointed. The fit and finish on these is rock solid, and it's well thought out between the enclosure, paint finishes, backing plate, the binding posts. It's really the whole package here. I can easily recommend this speaker as well as their floor standing models that I have personally listened to. Some might actually gravitate to the floor standing models just to avoid dealing with the stands, and that's okay too. Both are great options. This isn't a cheap speaker, but when you add everything up that I highlighted today, I don't think the price is unreasonable. Compare to the competition and what they offer and see how it stacks up for yourself. Appreciate all of you who have made it this far. Please like and subscribe so we can keep rolling, grow this community together. Let's chat soon. See ya.